First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting us, and I would like to say that we're so glad to be here. And our topic today is about teaching public speaking to tertiary education students. And the initial idea here from this, let's say, pedagogical, andragogical standpoint is that we strongly believe that it's worth incorporating some authentic materials in classroom instruction for teaching public speaking. And what we actually would like to postulate here is to combine two distinct fields of research, which are public communication, meaning political communication, together with didactics. So what we do is we teach courses in public speaking at the university, and now it's all based on the very initial underlying idea as suggested by Becker in 1964 in his human capital theory, that the sole role of the university is to equip the graduate with certain set of skills and abilities. So they need to accumulate them through the training and education. That's the idea. And we were wondering about how to make it even more practical and how to make it work fine with students, tertiary education students, to accumulate certain skills connected with public presentations. Marlena, if I could ask you to change the slide. And now what I do is I basically use certain coursebooks in my classroom instruction. However, these coursebooks are mostly connected with teaching vocabulary which is specific, field specific, vocabulary for presentation. And that's one step. That's, I would say, one thing we can do to make it even better, to equip our students in certain knowledge connected with the knowledge of vocabulary, right? So that's one thing we can do. But that's just not all. There's much more to it, to teach people how to present and how to do that professionally, because the whole thing connected with public presentations belongs to the very general idea of the skills demanded on the job market. And we need to develop those skills in most practical ways possible. So, Marlena, can we move on, please? One aspect of the study we conducted was emotion and the use of emotion in political public communication. It's stated clearly, and we take it from the field of political communication, that emotions are the central part of it. So if you want to make some impact, you need to employ emotions in your public speaking. I've got two examples here to illustrate what I'm telling about. It's a frame from Lyndon Baines Johnson presidential campaign from 1963, which is the daisy, the spot, which was used in the campaign in order to evoke certain emotions. These were negative emotions. The same trick was employed later on in 2008 by in presidential campaign by Hillary Clinton. And now we can see a clear link between the negative emotions used in campaigns and the rates of participation in the election. Marlena, if we could move on, please. Here it's stated clearly that the more negative emotions are used in the campaign, the higher the participation is. And what does it mean to us, people, teachers, instructors, teaching public communication? The conclusion is very simple. We need to teach people to present in a way which involves emotions. Marlena, let's move on, please. We need to remember that the rhetoric of emotion and that we refer to here in public speaking is strongly related to socio-cultural consideration. There are certain socio-cultural considerations to be taken into account. And it's not going to be the same in Scandinavia as it is in Poland, as it is in America, for example. So again, we need to be very culture specific. And in this context, because I've mentioned Scandinavia, political communication is more pragmatic, less emotional. So that's just one example that emotions do not always work. However, in many cases, that would make a public presentation or a public speech much more receptible, let's say, and more impactful, I would say. Okay, Marlena, please, let's move on. So in our study, we focused on the recall elections in California, which were the past year in 2021. The whole idea was about comparing the communication strategies employed by two rivals running for the governor of California office. That was Gavin Newsom, the incumbent governor, and his rival Larry Elder from the Republican Party. The idea was to compare the tricks of the trade employed by those two candidates in order to see which, let's say, which way of using them or employing them works better. Marlena, if we could move on. And we combined it with the results of the election. So we basically, the initial assumption was that the candidate who is more successful in communication would most probably win the election. In this case, that was Governor Gavin Newsom, who was the winner. Larry Elder was not able to regain the office. Okay, Marlena, let's move on. So our two main research questions were: how do you characterize the rhetorical competence of the winner in the relation to the application of Aristotle's triad? And the second question: how do you characterize the rhetorical competence of the loser in the relation to the application of these Aristotle's triad? Okay, Marlena, let's move on. And the whole underlying concept is, of course, something which is, I suppose, known to everyone here in the field of linguistics. It's communicative competence as postulated by Heinz in 1972, slightly moderated in 2004 by Poznanian professor Puppel. So how do we define communicative competence? It is about the use of both verbal and non-verbal elements of communication framed in a cultural context in a way which is consistent with the situational or social context. So simply speaking, it is about using verbal and non-verbal ways of communicating simultaneously in a way which is regarded as professional and suiting the context. And it is combined with rhetorical competence, which is a competence of a higher level, which we define as the ability to communicate using principles derived from classical rhetoric. It is about the ability to speak and argue and to win over the audience, which requires the acquisition of additional knowledge and more practice, of course. Okay, Marlena, so let's move on, please.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. So in rhetorical competence, it is the knowledge of classical rhetoric. that is important. And in classical rhetoric, it is Aristotle who contributed considerably to the shape of the field under analysis. In Aristotle's rhetoric, it is logos, ethos, and pathos that are very important. There are three basic elements, and logos, ethos, and pathos represent modes of persuasion. And now a few words about ethos. Ethos refers to the credibility of the speaker. Successful persuasion in terms of ethos depends on the speaker's believability, reliability, and competence. The speaker must be therefore trustworthy and competent, whereas the message presented by the speaker must be reliable. Pathos. Pathos appeals to the receiver's emotions, deeply rooted beliefs, worries, and prejudices. Pathos is aimed at arousing empathy among the audience. Pathos, first of all, makes the audience feel as if they participated personally in what is being presented. Pathos is often a catalyst that makes the audience act. Logos. Logos rests on logic and reasoning. In order to support an argument, it appeals to the rationality of the receiver. Persuasion in terms of logos makes use of evidence and proofs, certificates, statistical data, and universal truths. And with reference to our research questions, we will now present a few details with regard to the rhetorical competence of Larry Elder. And it is Arthur's part. So once again, Arthur.
Okay. So I'm back here. And I would like to say what we've done about regarding the analysis. So there were several so-called hot topics that we concentrated on. And these were including, for example, crime rate issues. And we were trying to analyze them in strong connection with those ethos, pathos, and logos. So elements of which were the most visible in each speaker's utterances. So here we have an example of Larry Elder's statement about Newsom's already releasing these people, referring to prisoners. So that's one example. Marlena, let's move on to the second one, please. Another hot topic was, of course, the COVID-19 regulations. And here again, we were trying to establish which elements of ethos, pathos, of logos were actually most visible as a strategy employed by the speaker. And here we can see that the speaker, this Larry Elder, was not that concerned with the topic, and we might definitely say that he didn't make use of it. It was not enough, not strong enough as to attack the opponent. And here we have some examples of the language used in the campaign. Okay, so let's move on, please. Another interesting issue used in the campaign was the issue of the homeless people And that was strictly referring to Gavin Newsom's idea of building some houses, providing housing for from the unemployed and homeless people. And here, Elder was referring to the very idea of those houses being much too expensive. And that was, according to American standards, too, I would say, socialist, meaning that the state shouldn't interfere, and that should be the private companies to build the houses, which would make them much cheaper. So in this particular case, we would say that the Elder was rather referring to logos, meaning that there was some reasonable implications connected with pricing, let's say. Okay, now let's please move on. And finally, again, an example of logos used by Larry Elder, referring to the economy and the taxation policies. And of course, I mean, we're experiencing that in our country as well. Nobody likes to be robbed by the government, meaning that we don't like when the taxes are going up. And this issue was used in the campaign. And again, if maybe that's our assumption here, that if Larry Elder used more ethos or pathos here, referring to those conservative values, for example, maybe the strategy would appear to be more effective. However, trying to be rational and referring to numbers, most probably that wasn't successful as it could be. Okay, let's move on, please. And now one word about the non-verbal aspect. We can see here one of the press conferences, Larry Elder pointing out at the ships waiting to enter American territory. And that was connected with rising prices and some shortages on the market, connected with supposedly with Gavin Newsom's policy. So here we can see some reference to those visual aspects. So that's why we would say that belongs to the reign of non-verbal communication, because these pictures were used a lot widely in the campaign to indicate how bad the situation is with those ships waiting there and people not being able to get the goods they need. Okay. All right. So I think we're ready to move on, please.
And now Newsom's rhetorical competence. Gavin Newsom's rhetorical competence is characterized by the well-developed skill of using pathos. And the speech that exemplifies the elements of Newsom's rhetorical competence is the speech Newsom urges vote no in California recall election, the 14th of August, 2021. And in this presentation, I will concentrate on this particular speech, but in the case of other speeches made in the period under analysis, the same pattern has been followed. And Newsom, first of all, concentrates on evoking the emotions of his listeners. Emotions are evoked by the very formulation of the theme or slogan of the speech, which appears at the very beginning. Just vote no, and it is repeated many times. Just vote no. The slogan is short and rhythmical, which makes it easy to chant. Just vote no. The tone of the chant evokes emotions, whereas emotions make people act. The background of the speech is also important. Newsom is giving a speech, and in the background we can see a poster which evokes quite strong emotions. Apart from the slogan, "Vote No" and "Stop the Republican Recall," we can notice the use of capital letters and the exclamation mark next to the date. And we can also see red juxtaposed with black, and red generally expresses anger and aggression. When I see red, I very often think of bullfighting and the red piece of cloth used to cause aggression, used to attract the bull. After the slogan, which evokes feelings, that is to say, "Just vote no," there appears an attempt to tone the stimulated emotions via showing the positive consequences of voting no. Just vote no and get this balance back. The mention of getting this balance back is supported by smiling and a soft tone of voice. The above aspects evoke positive emotions, and they calm down. The above message is supported by the movement of Newsom's hand, which strengthens emotions connected with getting the balance back. The movement assures the public that the balance will be back. At this point, Newsom builds tension again, emphasizing the importance and role of the present moment. The decision is on the point of being made. The elections start this week and end on the 14th. The message is reinforced by pointing the index finger. Negative emotions are evoked again via referring to the negative consequences that the election of Larry Elder will cause. That is, disregarding climate changes, limiting abortion rights, a disadvantageous attitude towards the minimum wage, and other current economic and political problems. While referring to the opinions of the opponent, one of Elder's ideas is highlighted. Women are not as smart as men, a strong statement. Since the statement is exceedingly controversial, it will cause strong negative emotions, especially in the case of women. The above statements are reinforced by a stern look on Newsom's face and a very serious tone of voice. At the end of the speech, listeners' emotions are evoked via chanting, "Just vote no," and clapping. And the seriousness of the situation is highlighted by Gavin Newsom's serious face. Now, Newsom's rhetorical competence, which is the winner's rhetorical competence. The winner's rhetorical competence is characterized by the well-developed skill of making use of pathos in speeches, which plays the primary function in the speeches of the subsequent winner made in the period of California recall elections. And the loser's rhetorical competence. The loser's rhetorical competence is characterized by the inappropriate use of language resources. The language resources which were applied in Elder speeches in the period of California recall elections mainly appealed to logic and reasoning. It turned out that appealing primarily to reason was a mistake in the context of the recall elections in California. And some pedagogical applications. during public speaking courses, it must be emphasized that there are situations when appealing to emotions will be more effective than appealing to reason. The results of Newsom's policy were well known, so there was no need to emphasize them. It was even dangerous to concentrate on them, as they had led to the recall elections. Therefore, Newsom resorted to appealing to emotions, and thanks to it, he was successful. In sum, students should be remembered that arguments that appeal to reason in certain contexts may not work. It is not enough. So, and our sources, thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation.
Okay, so Marlena and Artur, thank you so much for this informative talk. And of course, you know, technology sometimes, you know, fails us, but we can use another technology. And Marlena, it was a very good suggestion to use phone calling. Thank you so much.
Just the simple equipment.
No, that's great, actually. You know, that was a great solution. Yeah, sometimes, you know, we might have this kind of problems. So this is the one of the, you know, disadvantages of technology. Okay, thank you so much. Now, let me check the questions. By the way, if you would like to, dear audience, if you would like to ask your questions in your in person, you can just raise your hands and you can ask your questions in person. Okay, so is Tamar here again? Because she said that she's going to ask her question in person. Yes, okay. Just a second. Could you please raise your hand, Tamari? Could you please? Okay. So this is now, I'll ask you to unmute. Okay, great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for this like a great evening and too broad and like one of my favorite topics in research interests. And as I have been actually listening to the speaker, I really got interested in your experience of teaching public speaking. Is it a separate model at university in tertiary education? I mean, because I also teach public speaking as a part of business communication course in my university. And if yes, then I'm interested, and I already asked question about in the chat, what are your favorite actually like so talks, like I mean like do you integrate also TED Talks when teaching political speeches? But in political speeches, which is your favorite one? That's what I want to hear. And one more question is related to the technique of framing in communication. And do you use this technique so in your in your course? Because I am like a novice researcher in this area. I recently worked with my Norwegian friend about framing in communication. That's why I'm extremely interested about this topic. Thank you very much also for the opportunity.
So it is Dr. Artur Urbaniak who teaches public speaking. So
Great.
Maybe I will ask him to answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We cannot hear you, Artur. Okay, so we cannot hear you, Artur. So Marlena, could you please, you know, try to...
My microphone was muted, so that was
okay. Okay, Artur. Okay, great.
So now I will try to answer the question. So yes, it is a separate module that we have at the university. It's the first year that we have the public presentation classes. We try to teach our students how to present in the most professional way so that they can get the right skill which is so necessary at the university as well. And I can hear from my fellow teachers, that actually it's working, and the presentation in all other classes are getting better and better. And I do believe that it's worth having such a class at all levels in tertiary education to promote public speaking, rhetoric, because it's useful, simply. As for the methodological and theoretical framework, I generally try to use my own publications, my own experience. I keep saying that I've seen more than several thousand presentations that I evaluated, and that makes me a person who's qualified to say what's good and what's not. However, as for the literature, of course, it's plentiful, and every year we refer to different sources, including the ones you've mentioned: TED Talks, Toastmasters. These are let's say the materials which are already available on the internet. Everyone can use them and make some benefit from having them around. Plus, of course, we have course books for developing vocabulary. Yeah, so I don't know whether that would suffice here, or if you have more questions regarding that. If I shall be more specific, just let me know, please.
I think that our university and the profile of our university is very important here, because we are a university of applied sciences. So we are a university of a more practical type, and that is why practical skills, first of all, are taught to our students, and public speaking represents just one of such practical skills in the field of philology. So speaking professionally, having both verbal and non-verbal communication under control.
Okay. Thank you so much for your responses, Marlena and Artur. Tamar, do you have any further questions or suggestions? I see that you have typed some messages. Okay, just a second. Yeah, okay, you are unmuted. Yeah, okay,
yes,
great.
Thank you very much for this opportunity once again. And I would like to share with pleasure, maybe it can be like a very nice resource, the podcast from my friend, of course, who has rhetoric in PhD in like communications from US, and David Saxon. He runs a very extremely insightful and informative podcast on rhetoric communication skills with like a great experts and keynote speakers. And sometimes when it's related to the topic, I give this extensive listening activity to my students, and so they get more and more motivated to be listening to the gurus. That's why I will be sharing with my modest like expertise of teaching public speaking, like this resource. And thank you very much for this very informative session. That's all from me.
Okay, thank you so much.
For others.
Thank you so much. See you again, Tamar.
See you,
Okay.
bye.
And we have another, in-person question. Nadia, is Nadia there? Nadia, okay, great.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to attend this webinar with you. My name is Kaisi Nadia. I'm a PhD candidate from Morocco. It's like my second time attending webinars with you, and it's always a pleasure for me. My questions for Professor Artur concerning what steps can teachers practice to gain confidence in public speaking. The other question, also for Professor Artur, can social media platforms promote an opportunity for youth to improve their public speaking skills? The third one is for Professor Marlena. What is public speaking skills contribute to political communication? Thank you in advance, and it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So is Artur here again? Sorry for Artur. Artur? We cannot hear you clearly. Marlena, could you please put the phone close to the, okay, great.
Right, great. So maybe now it's better?
Yeah, better. Yeah, thank you.
Good, great. So referring back to the first question, that's a big issue there. Of course, I do believe that, unfortunately, we need to say that straightforward. A lot of teachers, academics would need a proper training in public speaking. That's a big, big problem there with instructors, educators, academic teachers not being able to present in a way which we would expect them to. So we also run such courses for academics, trying to show them the mistakes they keep making while presenting. Simple things, even simple things like turning their back at the audience, mumbling, not being able to get to the point, numerous mistakes. And self-awareness would do here. And definitely, I do believe that academic teachers should have a proper training on how to present, because that's something that I think would make them more self-confident while giving classes. I would say it's a personal thing. Some of us are more qualified. Some of us are less qualified. However, we all need to develop in this regard. Getting back to the second point about the social media, it depends on how we define the public speaking. Of course, social media is one aspect. In my classes, I definitely concentrate on public speaking understood as live performances, right? However, I do believe that we should also consider using the social media as an important aspect, because as we can see right now, more and more often we're supposed to present online using different technologies, different media. So that's another step. But it's more technological, it's more technology focused, technology based. Because if you can present to live audiences, most probably you'll be able to present to live audiences with the support of some digital media. That's what I believe. However, maybe another type of training we all need, including myself, is the one connected with using technologies. Right? I'm not a digital native, so that's something I need to learn.
Okay, thank you so much, Artur. Marlena? Okay, so you're also, helping us. Okay.
So political communication and public speaking. I think public speaking and the skill of public speaking is crucial in political communication because in general, politicians must persuade people to vote and to support their policy. So means of persuasion are crucial. Means of persuasion are crucial because this is what our research shows, that sometimes logic is not important, especially in the case of problems that are controversial and that we know that logical explanations will not work because logical explanations may show that politicians are not right, but they have to persuade people that their policy is right. So that is why they work with emotions. They work with emotions. For example, in the case of such controversial issues like limiting abortion rights, logical arguments may cause aggression and may not be accepted, and they are not accepted in general. But when we present present a picture of an infant who is very little, extremely dependent on parents and other people, and the infant that is developing in the womb of a mother, the situation is different because emotions are evoked, and everyone loves such pictures, and we all feel that it may be our child, it may be a child that belongs to our family. So emotions are crucial in the case of politicians, and not only argumentation is important. In political communication, it is important to control verbal resources. So we must know what language should be chosen to suit particular types of the audience. So we will use a different type of language during formal meetings among academics, but we will use a different type of language while talking to children or to lawyers or doctors. So this is the knowledge that is crucial. And what else? It is also necessary to control non-verbal aspects. Non-verbal communication is important. For example, in the case of Newsom, I'm sure that he practiced before the speech how to combine non-verbal aspects like pointing his finger, like smiling, like moving his hands, and so the correlation between non-verbal communication and verbal messages was crucial. And in fact, he was the winner.
We have two more questions, if you don't mind, Marlena and Artur. One question is from Peter. This is a very interesting question. So he asks, how do we avoid framing topics that aren't supposed to be political, but due to cultural or ideological issues is unfortunately treated as one? So is there a mechanism to avoid for this or pacify this, but not ever abandoning the critical issues? So this question is interesting. It says that, so how can we talk about the things, although they are not cultural or ideological issues, but in a way, in the society or in the country, they are considered, cultural issues, but so sometimes, as teachers, we have to avoid those issues, So the question is interested in, how can we promote critical issues, discussion in the class, but we shouldn't abandon these cultural or ideological issues. It's not an easy question to answer, by the way. What can you say about this?
So if I can take this question, Marlena?
Yeah.
Okay, hope you can hear me. So the answer to this very difficult question is actually very simple. The thing is that whatever matters we're dealing with of political nature do not concern us that much, because what we are dealing with is the mechanics of speech, nonverbal elements. It's more about how it's done, and not about what's being said actually. So whatever materials, authentic materials we use in the classroom, it's only for the sake of analyzing the use of gestures, the vocabulary, the strategies employed, but not about the very political content. Plus, there is an underlying assumption that with freedom of speech, we might actually discuss and approach different problems and dilemmas without hesitation. We might share our opinions, but we do not need to make others believe that what we claim is any way more important or I would say prevailing that to what others think. So basically, summing up, the answer is simple. We do not discuss the political issues in the public presentation classes. We discuss the very mechanics of speech production, the very way of using gestures in political communication, and we stay away from anything resembling politics.
Okay, so another question, and this is the last question for this session, if you don't mind. So the question is from Fidel Checkma. Fidel, by the way, would you like to ask this question in person? If you are still there, if you can hear us, would you like to ask this question in person, or would you like me to ask the question? Okay. All right, so let me ask the question. Okay, just a second. Okay. The question is, how do individual differences, for example, personality, introvert versus extrovert person, affect the performance? Do each student of us have to outperform in public speaking? So should we force our students to, practice public speaking? If they are, for example, introverted people, if they do not want to speak. If not, a spot for individual differences. If not, how can we put on individual differences in the task of public speaking? So what can we do regarding the individual differences in the task of public speaking? The question is, as far as I understand, is saying that if our students do not account on, okay, by the way, so if our students they have different personalities, introvert, extrovert, etc. So do we have to force each of our students to practice public speaking? So what can we say about that, Marlena or Artur?
Well, I think this is what public speaking classes.
There's a problem with your microphone. Could you please speak too close to the?
Okay.
Okay.
So I think this is what public speaking classes really are. So even if students are shy and they are unwilling to present in public, this is what they learn during public speaking classes. So as Dr. Urbaniak has already mentioned, we present some framework that is learned and within which a student should perform. So these are skills that must be learned. Of course, it is more difficult for students who are introvert to learn public speaking. And I think that in the case of each person, appearing in public and speaking in front of a very large group of people is difficult, but this is what we learn, and practice makes perfect. And providing our students with some rules that govern public speaking is successful, and everyone can learn to be a speaker. Sometimes it takes more time. Sometimes it takes less time. It depends on personality traits. And Artur, would you like to comment as well?
Which means that you are born a poet, but you are trained as a speaker. That means we can try to help them become great speakers, and we are fully aware that not all of them will become great speakers. But it's worth trying.
Okay, let me check in just a second if there are any further questions, but you know, I think we have no further questions. So I would like to again thank you, Marlena and Artur, for this session. It was very informative. And there are, by the way, if you don't mind, could you please share your email addresses in the chat, if you don't mind, because there are some further questions and some of the audience might like to get in touch with you. And one person is asking again, Ali, Eston Ali, so which is more important, content or delivery? I should say both. Can I answer the question? You know, I should say that both, yeah, both are important, you know, the content and the delivery, because sometimes even, you know, how you deliver something is more important than the content, but you should keep a balance, I think, between these two. Okay, so which is, you know, very challenging. Joanna, would you like to say anything? And would you like to, you know, say the final words?
Thank you very much to our great presenters, and of course to our participants, because without you, we cannot discuss, we cannot exist. So please stay with us. So subscribe our webinar channel and join us for our next webinar.
Okay. Thank you so much, and we would like to see you in the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful session.
Bye-bye.